Hey everyone, so today I'm going to talk about basic trigonometrical functions. This is just basic trigonometry. For example, when I was in school, I wanted to know why the angles of sine, cosine, and tangent were always 0, 30, 45, 60, 90. For example, why isn't it 25 or 24 or 44 or 50 or 55? Why does it have to be always 0, 30, 45, 60, 90? It's one thing that was not taught to me in school. So I'm going to talk about this today. Okay? So here we go. The first thing that I want to understand, that I want to explain is what sine, cosine, and tangent is. The tangent is just the sine divided by the cosine. Okay, that's the tangent. Now the sine is if you have a vector here, all right? This is a vector. You got a space from this arrowhead here. You got a space that comes down here and the one that comes to the right, okay? This space that comes to the right here is going to be the cosine. This distance is the cosine. Well, it's this distance here divided by this, but this is a unit circle, so this one right here is just 1, okay? So since it's this distance here divided by 1, it's just this distance here. All right, and so this is the cosine, right? This is going to be the sine. Now, the sine of 0. 0 is when, since we're talking about angles, 0 is when the arrowhead is horizontal, okay? The vector is horizontal and the arrowhead is touching the x-axis. So what is the vertical distance here? It's nothing, it's 0 because the thing is horizontal, right? It's on the x-axis. So the sine of 0 is 0 because the distance between the arrowhead and the x-axis is 0 because this arrowhead right here is on the x-axis. So this arrowhead right here is on the x-axis, so the sine of 0 is 0. What about the cosine of 0? Well, the cosine of 0 is going to be the distance from this arrowhead to the y-axis. Now, what is this distance right here? It's 1 because we're talking about the unit circle whose radius is 1. So the cosine of 0 is 1. Since the tangent is 0 divided by, is the sine divided by the cosine, it's 0 divided by 1, so it's just 0. Now we're going to go to 90 because it's easier, okay? At 90 degrees, the vector is here, and you got a 90-degree angle here. That'll be a 90-degree angle. Okay, so what is the vertical distance from the arrowhead to the x-axis? What is this distance here? It's 1. Okay, that is why we've already done these 3. All right, now here we go again. I got a vector here in the arrowhead. The distance from the arrowhead to the x-axis is 1. That's why the sine of 90 is 1. Right? Now, what's going to be the distance? Oh, okay, hold on. Man, I'm bad at these programs. Okay, now when you have 90 degrees here, what's going to be the distance from this arrowhead to the y-axis? It's 0 because the arrowhead is on the y-axis, okay? So that's why the cosine of 90 is 0. All you got to do is think about the horizontal distance is going to be the cosine and the vertical distance is going to be the sine. So if you have 0 degrees, you got a horizontal distance of 1. That's why the cosine of 0 is 1. You got a vertical distance of 0. That's why the sine of 0 is 0. Okay, and the tangent is just the cosine divided by the sine. When you have 90 degrees, the horizontal distance is 0. That's why the cosine of 90 is 0. And the vertical distance is 1. That's why the sine of 90 is 1. All right. And the tangent of 90 doesn't exist because 1 divided by 0 doesn't exist. Why doesn't 1 divided by 0 exist? Because if you have 1 divided by 0, let's just say that it does exist. Let's assume that it exists. So 1 divided by 0 is x, okay? What number can you plug in x that will multiply to 0 and the result will be 1? Nothing. Anything in here times 0 will be 0. So that's why anything times 0 will be 0. That's why 1 divided by 0 just doesn't exist. And that's why the tangent of 90 does not exist. All right. Now we're going to talk about 30 and 60 degrees. Okay. Where did these come from? Well, you have an equilateral triangle here. And this side right here is going to be 1. Why? Because you see, what's going to happen here is that there's going to be an analogy between when you have a vector here in the unit circle, okay, this distance here is 1. Look at what you have here. You have the sine, which is this distance, and you have the cosine, which is this distance. What do we have here? We got a right triangle, okay? So when you have a square, you want to make a right triangle out of it right here. And when you have an equilateral triangle, there's another video of mine on this channel that says that whenever you have the sum of all the internal angles of a triangle is 180 degrees. So when you have an equilateral triangle, all the angles are going to be the same. 180 divided by 3 is 60. So all these angles in here are 60 degrees, okay? Now, since they're all 60 degrees, this is not a right triangle. If it's not a right triangle with a right angle of 90 degrees, you cannot use Pythagoras theorem. And you do want to use Pythagoras theorem, okay? This is a right triangle because you got one side here, and this other side here, and you got a 90-degree angle here. Now, this is not a right triangle, so we got to make this a right triangle by dividing it by 2. Now you got a right triangle here. So I'm just going to erase this mess. Okay, so I'm just going to divide this equilateral triangle and make it a right triangle. Okay. All right, so now this is going to be 60 degrees. This one right here is 30 because we just divided 60 degree by half. That's 30 degrees. Okay, and you got a 90 degree over here, but I'm not going to place it there. Now, this side is 1, okay? What is this side right here? This side right here is 1 divided by 2. It's half. Why? Oh, because you're just dividing this side here by half. Okay. Now you have two sides of a right triangle. You can find a third side through Pythagorean theorem. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to call this h, which is the height. And you can say that h squared plus 1/2 squared is 1/4. So 1/4 equals 1. H squared equals 1 minus 1/4 equals 3/4. H is going to be equal, well, now you take the square root of both sides. And h is going to be the square root of 3 divided by the square root of 4, which is 2. Okay? So we can say that h equals square root of 3 divided by 2. Okay. Now, what is the sine of 30? Okay. That's going to be the vertical distance. The sine is the vertical distance divided by the hypotenuse, which is 1. So it's just the vertical distance. Now, what is this vertical distance right here? It's square root of 3 over 2. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm just making a mistake here. That'll be the cosine of 30 because you see, there's something else that I have to teach you guys. Here we go with our right triangle again, right? Now, this is going to be 1. Well, it doesn't really matter what it is in this case. Now, you got an angle here, okay? What's going to be the sine? I said that the sine was going to be this distance divided by 1. Yeah, in this case, it is this distance here because it's always the opposite side to the angle. So the sine is going to be this side divided by the hypotenuse, okay? The cosine is going to be the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse, okay? So what is the sine of 30? The sine of 30 was going to be the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. So it's half divided by 1, which is half. We got here. What's the cosine of 30? The cosine of 30 will be the adjacent side, which is this one, divided by the hypotenuse, which is 1. So the cosine of 30 is square root of 3 divided by 2. All right. What is the sine of 60? It's going to be the opposite side. Well, sorry. Yeah. The sine of 60 is going to be the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. The opposite side is square root of 3 divided by 2. So the sine of 60 is square root of 3 divided by 2. Yeah, we already got that. Now the cosine of, well, yeah, the cosine of 30. Man, this is a mess. Okay. What I meant to do here, I made a mistake. What I meant to do was the cosine of 30. The cosine of 30 is going to be the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. So the cosine of 30 is this. All right. The sine of 30, the sine of 60 is going to be the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. So it's here. Square root of 3 divided by 2. The cosine of 60 will be the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. So will be this one. The tangent of 30 is going to be sine of 30 divided by the cosine of 30. So we have 1/2 divided by square root of 3 divided by 2. Now when you divide fractions, you keep the first fraction and you multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So instead of times square root of 3 divided by 2, it's times 2 divided by the square root of 3. So you cancel these. You're going to have 1 divided by the square root of 3. But you don't want to leave a square root in the denominator. So you multiply the whole thing by square root of 3, okay? Now, 1 times square root of 3 is square root of 3. And square root of 3 divided by times square root of 3 is 3. That is why, okay, that is why the tangent of 30 is square root of 3 divided by 3. Right. Now the tangent of 60 is going to be square root of 3 divided by 2 times the reciprocal of half, because it's square root of 3 divided by 2 divided by half. Dividing by half is the same as multiplying by 2. So you simplify these and you have square root of 3. That's why, okay, the tangent of 60 is square root of 3 here. All right, so all these are covered, right? I know that I made a mess here in the beginning with the sine and the cosine, but the sine of 30 is going to be the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. That's why it's half. The cosine of 30 is going to be the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. That's why it's square root of 3 divided by 2. The sine of 60 is going to be the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. That's why it's square root of 3 divided by 2. The cosine of 60 is going to be the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. That's why the cosine of 60 is half. Right? Okay. Now we're going to talk about the 45-degree angle. Where did it come from? Well, this is a square, and in a square you have a 90-degree angle everywhere. Okay. Now what they did was to divide this square in half, like this. Now since it is a square, this is a 45-degree angle. Okay. This side is x and this side is x. And they decided to make this side 1. Why? Because when you have a vector here, this side is analogous to this side of the, okay, so this side right here is analogous to this side, which is analogous to this side, okay? So that's why this side here is 1. So you got to find out the other two, okay? So you're going to use Pythagorean theorem again to find out this, the side of this right triangle. So here we go. You have one side squared, which is x squared, plus the other side squared, which is x squared, equals the hypotenuse squared, which is 1. So you have 2x squared equals 1, x squared equals 1 divided by 2, x equals 1 divided by the square root of 2. Now you don't want to leave a square root of 2 in the denominator, so you multiply everything to square root of 2. So 1 times square root of 2, square root of 2. Square root of 2 times square root of 2, 2. Right? That is why, okay, now hold on. So this side right here equals square root of 2 divided by 2, and so is the other side, okay? Square root of 2 divided by 2. Now, what is the sine of 45 degrees? The sine is going to be the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. And that's square root of 2 divided by 2 divided by 1. And that's what you have here. What is the cosine of 45? The cosine of 45 will be the adjacent side, which is square root of 2 divided by 2 divided by the hypotenuse. And that's what you have here. And the tangent is going to be square root of 2 divided by 2 divided by square root of 2 divided by 2, which is what? 1. And there you go. You have this entire table covered.